Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're looking at something pretty fascinating, a watercolor called Venetsia, 1976, by Bob Camblin. And I think it's so interesting how one single artwork can kind of bring together art Zen philosophy and even the I Ching.
Yeah, it really is kind of a unique blend of things. And I think even before we get into all the, philosophy and the I Ching and all that, it's worth kind of just lingering on the painting itself for a second.
Hmm.
It's this kind of abstract landscape, you might say, with these really sort of earthy greens and blues kind of blending together in this way that just suggests this sense of openness in nature.
Yeah, it does have that kind of vastness to it, but it's not a literal depiction of
Yeah.
Venesis, right? I mean, just looking at it, those brushstrokes almost feel like a dream. It's intriguing how a painting with such a specific title can still be so open to interpretation.
Yeah, and I think that kind of that openness really ties in well with this Zen concept of ku, which is emptiness. Now, before you think this is all about nothingness, you know, ku is a little bit more nuanced than that.
Hmm.
It's really the idea that things don't have this fixed inherent nature. Everything is impermanent. Everything's constantly changing and interconnected.
I can see how that connects to the painting's abstract style. I mean, there aren't any hard lines. There aren't any clearly defined objects. It's like the forms themselves are in a state of flux, mirroring that Zen idea of impermanence. But how does that idea of emptiness, apply to us, in our everyday lives?
Well, think about it this way. How often do we get caught up in rigid ideas or, fixed identities or this need to control things? And embracing ku can be incredibly liberating because it really encourages us to let go of those attachments,
Yeah.
to recognize that our thoughts, our emotions, even our sense of self are constantly shifting.
It's a really interesting way to think about it. It's almost like the painting is prompting us to look at the undefined spaces in our own lives, those areas where we might be clinging to fixed ideas or resisting change.
Exactly. And that's where the I Ching connection comes in. So the source material, links Venetsia 1976 to hexagram 20, which is known as contemplation. And this hexagram encourages us to observe, to see things clearly without, imposing our preconceived notions.
So are you saying that the painting itself can be a tool for contemplation, even for somebody who's not, familiar with Zen Buddhism or the I Ching?
Absolutely. The way the painting just kind of invites us to linger, to simply observe those colors and forms without, needing to analyze or interpret them.
Yeah.
That's a form of contemplation in itself. And it really aligns well with the I Ching's emphasis on, perceiving the true nature of things beyond our mental filters.
Now, speaking of perception, this painting also fits into a broader kind of art historical context. You mentioned abstract expressionism earlier. How does Venezia 1976 connect to that movement?
Well, abstract expressionism was all about expressing inner emotions and experiences through spontaneous gestural brushwork. And I think Venezia 1976 definitely shares that focus on conveying a feeling or a mood rather than a literal representation of reality.
Hmm.
And you can really see that in, those free-flowing brushstrokes and the way the colors just kind of blend and bleed into each other.
And it also feels connected to landscape painting, even though it is abstract, that sense of open space, the earthy tones. It evokes a place, an atmosphere.
You're absolutely right. It really echoes those, landscape traditions that emphasize capturing the essence of a place, its mood, its spirit, rather than its precise details. Think of those misty Chinese landscapes or even, some of those impressionist paintings where the focus is on capturing those fleeting effects of light and color.
So we're seeing how this one painting can act as a bridge between different worlds, Eastern philosophy, Western art, abstract expression. And the suggestion of a specific location, pretty amazing feat for a watercolor, makes you wonder, how did the artist, Bob Camblin, even approach creating this piece?
Yeah, that's where the real mystery lies, and that's what we'll pick up after a quick break.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about, that creative process behind a piece like Venezia 1976. One of the sources actually describes it as, channeling something unseen into a physical form.
Well, that's interesting because Camblin starts with, a blank canvas, this kind of void,
Yeah.
and then through his brushstrokes and, colors, he brings forth these forms that, as we've been discussing, ultimately point back to that very formlessness.
Yeah.
It's like this paradox playing out on the canvas.
Exactly. And that paradox, I think, is at the heart of so much abstract art. It exists in this liminal space between the defined and the undefined, the concrete and the abstract. It's both this manifestation of something specific, but also this pointer to something much larger than itself.
And that makes me think about, us, the viewers, and how we interact with the piece. We bring our own experiences and interpretations to it. So the meaning of Venezia in 1976, it isn't static. It's always kind of evolving. What do you think? I think you've hit on something really crucial there. One of the sources actually emphasizes this as well, how Venetsia, 1976, doesn't offer a single conclusive meaning, but rather invites us to kind of engage with it on a personal level and discover our own meanings.
So it's like the painting is asking us, do you see what resonates with you? It's less about, understanding the artist's intentions and more about this self-discovery.
Precisely as we contemplate the artwork, as we let ourselves be drawn into those undefined spaces, it becomes like a mirror, reflecting our own inner landscapes. And, our own thoughts and emotions and memories begin to surface. It's like this conversation between the artwork and our subconscious.
That reminds me of a quote from one of the sources that really struck me. It says, this artwork is not about understanding, but about feeling. It
hmm
seems to suggest that we should experience Venezia in 1976, viscerally, intuitively, without kind of overanalyzing it.
Yeah, and that intuitive, emotional response can be incredibly insightful because
Yeah.
it can really help us connect with, parts of ourselves that we may not even be consciously aware of.
I'm starting to see how everything we've been discussing kind of comes full circle. The painting's abstract nature, the Zen and I Ching connections, the invitation to contemplation. It's all pointing us inward, toward this deeper understanding of ourselves.
And that's really where its true power lies. Venezia 1976 isn't just about appreciating a beautiful image. It's about using that image as a springboard for personal growth and transformation.
So in a way, engaging with this painting can be a spiritual practice, not in a religious sense necessarily, but, in a way that encourages mindfulness and self-reflection.
You could definitely say that, it's about cultivating a mindful presence. Being open to those undefined spaces within ourselves and the world around us, and perhaps allowing those undefined spaces to become, sources of insight and inspiration.
When we first started talking about Venezia in 1976, I was a little intimidated. Abstract art can feel so elusive at times, but now I'm starting to see it in a whole new light.
That's the beauty of it. Abstract art challenges us to step outside our comfort zones and embrace ambiguity. And, it encourages us to trust our own intuitive responses. And in doing so, we open ourselves up to this whole new world of meaning and possibility.
And something else that strikes me about Venezia 1976 is how it embodies that idea of impermanence, of constant change, the blending colors,
Yeah.
lack of those fixed forms. It's a visual representation of the fact that nothing stays the same.
And that is such a crucial takeaway, especially in today's world where everything feels so fast-paced and uncertain. And, the painting really reminds us that impermanence is not something to fear. It's simply a fundamental aspect of reality, and it's the source of, creativity, growth, and ultimately liberation.
There's that old Zen saying, we're like water always flowing, always changing, and it feels incredibly relevant to this painting.
Exactly. And just like water carves its path through a landscape, so too do our experiences shape who we are.
That's a beautiful analogy. It really captures the essence of what we've been discussing.
But the analogy goes even deeper. Think about how water in its fluidity can adapt to any container, any situation. It's both yielding and powerful. And so too are we when we embrace the impermanence of life.
Yeah.
When we let go of rigid attachments and allow ourselves to flow with that current of change.
Wow, this whole conversation has been really eye-opening. I think I need a moment to process all of this.
Yeah, take your time. These are big ideas. They need time to settle in.
I have a feeling our listeners are going to need a moment too. This deep dive has been full of so many, unexpected connections and profound insights, and to think we're not even done yet.
There's still more to uncover. We've only just begun to explore this, rich tapestry of meaning woven into Venezia in 1976.
I'm excited to see where we go next, but for now, let's take a quick pause to let everything sink in. We'll be back soon to wrap up our exploration of this incredible artwork.
Okay, we're back. And, I'm still kind of reflecting on everything we've discovered about Venezia in 1976. I mean, this painting, it really feels like a portal to a different way of thinking.
Yeah, it really does. And to think we've only just scratched the surface of its many layers of meaning and, the connections that it kind of sparks.
Before the break, you mentioned how Venezia 1976 can be a tool for psychological exploration. I'm curious to hear more about that. How can a painting help us kind of delve into our own psyche?
Well, remember how we talked about the painting's undefined spaces, its lack of, concrete forms? Well, those spaces can be seen as metaphors for the undefined areas within us, those parts of ourselves that we haven't fully explored or understood.
So it's like the painting is holding up a mirror to our own inner landscapes, encouraging us to look at those things we might typically avoid. Exactly. And often, real growth and self-discovery happens in those undefined spaces, those areas where we feel uncertain.
It's like the painting is saying, don't be afraid of the unknown. Embrace the mystery. You'll find the most valuable insights in the not knowing. It's a pretty powerful message.
It is, and it goes beyond just, uncovering hidden aspects of ourselves. Engaging with a piece like Venetsia, 1976, can also challenge our assumptions and make us question the stories we've created about, who we are and what's possible.
Can you give an example of what you mean?
Sure. Imagine someone looking at Venetsia 1976 and feeling a sense of, unease because of its lack of structure, its ambiguity. Well, that unease might point to a deep-seated need for control, or a fear of the unknown. But by acknowledging that discomfort and exploring its roots, that person can begin to loosen the grip of those limiting beliefs and open up to new ways of being.
That's really insightful. It's not just about, interpreting the painting itself, but using it as a tool for self-reflection, to better understand our own patterns and tendencies.
Exactly. And that's what makes art so transformative.
Yeah.
It's not just this passive object to admire, but an active force that can, challenge and inspire us and ultimately help us evolve.
So this idea of using art for psychological exploration, is that, specific to abstract art, or can it apply to any type of art?
That's a great question. While, abstract art with its emphasis on emotional expression and ambiguity might lend itself more readily to this kind of introspection, I believe that any artwork can serve as a catalyst for self-discovery. It's about being open to what the artwork evokes in you, the feelings and memories it stirs up, and then being willing to explore those responses.
Right. Because even if a painting depicts, a very specific scene or objected, their own personal associations and experiences will inevitably color how we see it.
Absolutely. And those personal interpretations, they're valuable. They offer clues to our inner world, revealing the things that matter to us and shape our worldview.
So it's not about finding the right interpretation. It's about honoring, our own unique response to the artwork.
Exactly. And allowing that response to kind of guide us on a journey of self-discovery.
So as we kind of bring this deep dive to a close, what's the, one key takeaway you'd want our listeners to kind of walk away with?
I think the most important message here is that art is not just about aesthetics. It's about connection. It's about connecting with ourselves, our emotions, the world around us, even with something larger than ourselves. And I think Venetsia 1976 is such a beautiful example of how art can bridge those inner and outer worlds, inviting us to explore the depths of our own being and discover that profound interconnectedness of all things.
Oh, that's beautifully put. This has been such an incredible journey. This painting has really opened my eyes to a whole new way of seeing and experiencing art.
I feel the same way. It's been a privilege to explore these ideas with you and with our listeners, and I have a feeling this conversation won't end here. Venetsia 1976 is the kind of artwork that stays with you, continuing to reveal new layers of meaning long after that first encounter.
I think you're right, and maybe this deep dive will inspire our listeners to explore other abstract artworks and see, what hidden truths and insights they might find in those undefined spaces. So thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, the exploration never truly ends. Keep questioning, keep feeling, keep connecting. You never know what amazing discoveries await you.